the Generative Leadership Grad Panel. Welcome you. We'll be getting started here in just a minute here as folks show up, and hopefully we see some folks. And I see Natalie. Thank you for joining us today. And lovely Natalie. And I know we have a few others that had also registered here today. So we'll give it just a minute here before we get started. Love seeing these beautiful faces that I've gotten to know over many years now, folks that are finishing up their work with us or have graduated from the advanced programs at the Institute for Generative Leadership. For those of you that I haven't met yet, if you're watching, my name is Chris Beauchamp. I work with Bob Dunn at the Institute for Generative Leadership, and I will be your facilitator today. And given that we have just a minute after the hour, I'll let you all know as you're entering in. If you're on the recording, you don't have to worry about any of this. As if you're coming in, we do have a couple options for you to participate, and you can do so by either the chat or the Q&A, and you'll find those buttons, depending, should be up in the upper left-hand corner of your screen. On my end, it's at the bottom, but you might find it in either spot. And if you have questions for our panelists, definitely encourage you to type in those questions, or you can even raise your hand. We can bring you into the conversation as a panelist and actually have a dialogue with the folks here. So I've done a little bit of an intro here, a little bit about the Institute. We started back in '93, so we've been going at this for a little while. It was Bob Dunn, our founder, that had been in work in organizations and seeing a lot of the breakdowns that were going on, and took a lot of what he learned and learning with others, and developed the programs that we offer at the Institute for Generative Leadership to support leaders like yourself, professional coaches in your work. And really, it's about elevating the results, things that matter to you. And, we can talk a lot about the programs, the learning that goes on in the programs, but, to really get a lot of value out of this, sometimes what we find is it can be better to listen from the outside perspective, listen to the folks who have had the experience, what their experiences were, and what the results were that they were able to produce through this work. It's unbiased, it's them, it's what they bring forward as opposed to what I could share with you in a conversation. So it's not going to be me talking, it's not going to be Bob talking, it's going to be the folks that have been in this. And as folks are joining here, I invite you again to ask questions, chime in on the chat. And let's go on ahead and get started, because we're a few minutes into the hour, and I know that we have three wonderful panelists here that have a lot of experience, a lot of wisdom to share here. And I'll just going to go through first our three panelists that we have here with us today. First off, we have Julio Nevada, and she is a CEO participant. Juliana is in her third year, so not quite a grad yet, but she might as well be. She's been around this work quite some time and doing some amazing work in her own right. Just so you know, if you're new to this, the CEO program is our Coaching Excellence in Organizations program for professional coaches. Andrea Bordenka. Andrea Bordenka is a graduate of our Generative Leadership program, the GLP program, and she's also CEO of her own company, as well as she's become a program coach for the Institute. So yeah, maybe a little bit of an inside perspective, but also the outside perspective that she can offer here. And last, we have Colo Bogart. Colo is a CEO participant as well, finishing up his last year in our programs. Also somebody that is highly experienced in both consulting and coaching, has run a successful business. He is one of the co-founders of Altus Growth Partners, the sister organization to the Institute, if you will. And we're going to get a chance to listen to all three of these folks here today and hear what their experiences are. And if you're just joining, and I see Michael just joining here, thank you for joining us here today. It's going to be a great experience to hear the experiences, as well as for you all to be asking the questions of them, so that you get a sense of what's really possible for you, right? So I'd like to just open it up here, and I'm gonna, I'll start with Andrea if you don't mind, and then Juliana, if you don't mind, I'll go to you next, and then Cobal will finish with you. Just put the guy last. But Andrea, if you can, talk to us a little bit about your experience, and maybe start off with, where were you in life, when you found the Institute? Both on a from a personal perspective as well as a professional perspective. And Julian and Koba, I'll ask you the same there. And and also we'll get to some other questions here, and I'll fill you in on that. So please go ahead.
Sure. Yeah, the reason why I have the inside perspective and I'm a program coach is because this work has been so impactful to me. So you had mentioned that I might have, a little bit of a bias because I'm a program coach. I graduated GLP close to 10 years ago, I think, and I've been in this discourse since 2000. And where I was at that time personally was I was in my mid-20s and still trying to navigate who I am. I was recently married, so what my roles were in life, in leadership, and professionally, I had just taken a job as a manager of a department, and I was doing it because historically I had this habit of being a really good performer. So I was in this, what we call super performer, where I was promoted, acknowledged for my work. And so what made sense to me at the time was to be in this managerial position. So here I am, a new wife, about to be a new mom. And, career-wise, everything seemed to be great. I'm on the right path. But what I didn't realize at the time was that I didn't really have a strong sense of self or my identity. And so because I had been such a good performer and acknowledged for my good work and my good work ethic, I was really burnt out and I didn't recognize it. I just thought that there was a problem that I had and that I needed to work harder to figure it out. And as I got older and more mature, that I'd work it out. But really what this learning opened up for me was that what was missing for me was who I am and what I care about. I was so hung up on everybody else's approval and validation that I didn't even lose myself. I didn't even know I didn't even have a sense of who that was. So through the questions about, what matters to you, what do you care about, and the different distinctions that opened up because of this learning, and everything that we do here is observable and actionable. And so really like seeing how I was carrying out what I cared about and that was missing was a huge breakdown and breakthrough for me. So then I was able to get more in touch with what it is that matters to me and not getting just caught up in what matters to everyone else around me. So I wear these compass earrings here. That's my reminder to myself and the people that I work with that our compass is internal and it's all in here and in our gut. And that when we're clear on where we're standing and where we're going, we have our own internal compass to guide us. We don't need to rely on the external influences there. It's what matters to us. So from that point to now, I went from being super burnt out, an alcoholic, all sorts of breakdowns in personal relationships, and not making a lot of money. So and that's the other thing too, is I'm working really hard. I'm in this managerial role and I'm not making a lot of money. So I'm thinking that I need to make more money. I need to work harder. So I'm burning myself out more, further disconnecting from my family, from my friends. And so now I'm at a place where I can hold bigger promises. I'm making 7 times the salary I was then. And I've started a youth initiative that brings these distinctions into schools and to public education. And I'm still the owner and CEO of DESCO, a healthcare service organization. And I'm in bigger conversations with bigger promises because now I know how to build teams, build trust. I know how to navigate from what I care about and I'm connected to my bigger purpose and vision in life. And this works. So that's why I'm a program coach, is because I'm so committed and so grateful for this work and how it's really enhanced my quality of life that I want to give it to as many people as I possibly can. And so, it's just had a tremendous impact, not just salary wise, which you remind me of that, Chris, and I'm glad because back then that was a big issue for me. Money was a big issue. And now it's not a concern anymore. I have other breakdowns, bigger breakdowns because of my bigger promise that are easier and less effortful for me to navigate because I have the skill set and the embodiment from this work to be able to handle the pressures that come my way versus me contracting in fear or running away from them like I used to do, or drinking myself to calm myself down. I don't drink at all anymore. So I just feel like I'm a completely different person because of this work in a very impactful, good, healthy way.
Yeah, beautiful. Well said. And there was a couple other questions here that we had, prompted all of you with, and I think you kind of spoke to it a little bit here in terms of, what you were hoping to achieve through this work. And was there anything else that, because I listen, income is, and that shows up for a lot of folks, right?
Yeah, sure.
Income is a concern. And you mentioned being burnt out. And I would imagine, hey, finding ways to, take the ease off, take the pressure off, and not be burnt out, would be something else that you might have been looking for. So was there anything else though that you remember you were looking for at the time?
Yeah. Yeah. So when I first signed up, I was thinking like, what are the skills I need to develop as a manager? And that was a breakdown to me because I was thinking that if I knew, like, if there was like some script or something you could hand me, like I'm signing up for this program, so hand me the answer and then I'll just implement it. But the questions were deeper than that. The questions for the first time in my life, I realized, didn't have a right or wrong or a yes or no answer. Like I learned in school, it was, these questions are like, well, what matters to you? And I'm like, well, I need to answer that for myself. I wasn't quite, that was something that I had never asked before and just didn't see how profound it was until I entered into this work to say, here I am signing up for this program, waiting to get this magical binder to tell me like what steps to take and what script to say to make this magic happen. And I realized it's a whole set of habits and conversations that need to happen that come from this place of heart, like really like what matters to me and how do I want to live my life? Like I can actually co-design this. That to me was a huge, like just awakening inflection point in my life because I just hadn't even entertained that question before. And that's what broke open all sorts of possibilities in this work. So what I signed up for initially versus what I got way beyond my expectations. And yeah, just really, yeah, beautiful.
Very nice.
Yeah.
And you shared a lot there. And what would you say was maybe the moment or the distinction or the thought, it could be any one thing that really landed in you that shifted from the person you entered in as to the person that then made the transition into, okay, I need to actually be a little bit more than the embodiment. I need to go deeper with the questions. Do you
Yeah.
remember?
For me, the distinction was trust. So coming into this, that was a blind spot for me. So I was under this notion that in order to get ahead, you needed to compete at the expense of other people. And so I wasn't producing trust in my relationships, at like my personal and intimate relationships, and also with people at work. And so once I was seeing people as like a transactional thing, like I need you to get something done. We have work to do. Like we don't have time for small talk. We don't have time. Like we don't need to get to know each other. Like we need to do what we got to do. There's the goal. Let's go for it. And so having this, like in order to build this identity of trustworthiness and trust to actually know what I care about and actually get to understand and know other people, like seeing them as human beings. And this sounds really like it's crazy to me to say this now because back then I just was in such a different place, but I love talking to people. Like back then, I don't know if you asked me, like, do you like people? I'd be like, not really, but I love people. And I just didn't see that the relationships and building the relationships and that trust, it was missing. It was completely missing from my life. So that distinction of trust and building an identity of trust that the Institute, it's an assessment, and the Institute teaches that and shows us how we can produce that, and then how we can actually produce it and learn from other people or ask for it or assess it in other people too. So we're trusting people in a more grounded way. That was a big one for me.
Beautiful. Yeah, as I listened to it, it was more than just what you would find in the binder. so to
Yeah.
speak. You know, that idea, that notion that you had, it was definitely something that you it almost sounded like you were forced to experience it in a way. Like you had to take it through to really be able to shift the conversations that produce the trust.
Yeah.
Very nice. And what else would you say has changed? And then after that, we'll open it up for any questions at that point, and we'll go to Juliana. But was there anything else that you noticed that changed for you or the organization? Or
Yeah, well, my organization, yeah, so much. There was a lot of mistrust in the organization because I was leading it. And so when I would look for trust, or mistrust, that's what I would find. And so there were a lot of people who were pointing the fingers and resentment and blame of other people. And so this work helped me to bring that into Desco, where we actually, instead of, we used to hire people for skill, like their resume, and say, okay, they have the technical abilities for this role, let's hire them. Completely change that to what are the attributes? What do we want to see that's actionable and observable within this organization? Because each one person makes up this culture. And so we came up with willingness to fail, collaboration, and ambition, personal development, professional development. And we have ways to actually assess that and observe it. So we talk about it often. So when we hire people, we ask them behavioral questions to help us understand how do they work through certain situations, because then we can see, is there resentment there? Is there ownership? Is there accountability for their actions? Are they blaming somebody else? Or are they, what's the lens they see the world in? And do we see that there'll be a cultural fit coming into Desco? And that has greatly increased not only our retention, because we're bringing the right people on board, but our onboarding process is much more refined now, because we're so clear. All of us are so clear on what we're looking for and listening for. We're all trained in that. The people that are in the HR department, onboarding people and candidates, that it's just a faster hiring process. And so that's a huge one, because now we have the right people on board. They are a good cultural fit. And then in terms of personal, my relationship with my husband, has been the most impactful. And with my parents, close friends. I didn't have friends before. Now I have a wide network of close friends. I've built communities locally here with friends to widen that network. So there weren't a lot of people in my life before when I first entered into this program. I came to the realization, and this comes with the trust too, that if I want to make a bigger impact in life, I need to get really competent at asking for help and finding people who have strengths that I don't have. And so I'm able to ask for help from my husband now, whereas before I would just take on everything and say, I got it, don't worry about it. And then I'd resent him for something. So as far as our relationship goes, I'm much more vulnerable and open and connected in a way that I wouldn't have even imagined that I could go years ago. So he's very grateful for this work as well.
I imagine.
I'm much nicer now. Yes.
I'm sorry?
I'm much nicer now.
Well, I've only had the experience.
I can attest to that.
Oh, really? Okay. Well, good. That's good to know. I didn't know Andrea before that. I'm glad I didn't get to know that. So no, yeah. I'm totally kidding.
I can bring that out sometimes if you want me to.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting what I listen part of, some of the things that I listen is, that so many different things I can listen in here in what you're sharing, and including, some of the listening skills when you're talking about the hiring process, and, even just reducing the hiring process is something else that, where we don't think about leadership skills actually having a connection to the bottom line or the tangible results. Hiring costs, when we actually take the time to measure it, and you're measuring it. Yes. Actually have an impact on the business. And so you're demonstrating, at least in my listening, what you're assessing is that your skills are better in that, and it's actually impacting the results of the company in a way that you can actually, put some numbers to it if you wanted to go that route. Right? Absolutely. Fantastic. Yeah. Well, thank you. Let me just take a quick pause here. We have, and Natalie and Michael and others, and you'll be listening, and you'll be wondering what other questions you have. Do we have any questions here at this moment here for Andrea? And I'll allow just a minute here to, just if you want to type or if you want to raise your hand, any of you, that you're welcome to do so. And I won't necessarily wait, but, go ahead, because what, what we find, and we find this on our webinars too, is that when you actually interact, when you actually ask the questions, sometimes we open up the conversation further than where we've already gone. And for others that are listening, your question can actually produce new thinking. It can be just as much a value to you as, or for them, as it is for you. So excuse my misspeak there, but I'll leave it at that.
Question here. Do you see it?
Well, she had a comment just saying, wow, that's beautiful, Andrea. So curious. Oh, yes, she did. She said, I'm curious about the moment when you noticed your strategy of working harder. Good. I missed the question mark, so I just looked at it as a statement. Yeah, please.
Strategy of working harder. So it was through a big breakdown when there were issues at Desco and it was harder for me to hold. And then there were issues at home in my personal relationship because I was so stressed out at Desco that I was tense and not accessible or available here at home. And I became so exhausted and I didn't like how I felt. And it was through the coaching, through the program, that I was able to see that, okay, if we know what we say at the Institute is all results that we get in life are a product of the conversations that we're in. So when I looked at the conversations I was in, I realized that there was a lot of things that were missing there, like one of them not asking for help, like not building a team. And so when I started to recognize what was missing with my coach, instead of me feeling like I had to figure it out all on my own, then I was able to see that this was a breakdown and a pattern that showed up an awful lot in my life throughout my childhood into adulthood. And so that it took a lot of mounting as I got older with the pressure of a family and with Desco, the pressure there of a bigger role there. That's when it came to a point where I couldn't contain anymore and needed to have some intervention there. So that was early on, actually, in my IGL learning, because I had a coach to be able to help me through that. And I had these distinctions that now okay, great. Now I'm new at this. So how do I apply them?
Yeah.
It's a good question.
Yeah. And then Natalie, you can, chime in the chat or the Q&A and let us know if that answered the question there. And, I think, Andrea, one of the things that you called upon is this notion that we have to go at it alone. And that is not uncommon. I don't know, I won't speak for Juliana and Koba, but I know I've had that experience myself too. And I hear it a lot in other conversations. So thank you for sharing. And I want to make sure we also get some time for some of our other folks. So we might come back to you. So see how we do with some time here. But if I may, I'd like to take a little pause here and transition over to my friend Juliana Vergara, who is in year 3 of CEO. And Juliana, maybe you can talk to us a little bit about, where you were when you found the Institute, and what were you hoping to achieve?
Yeah, thank you, Chris. So when I came upon the Institute, I had a big transition in my life. I moved to the States, and I didn't have a community. I left my country, I left my family, I left my job. I left everything behind for a bigger dream, because I was coming to get married, and so with my husband, which is also Colombian, but he had a job here. So when I came, I was pretty much lost. I didn't know what to do with my time or with my life. And my background a little bit is I studied psychology, and I was doing it in schools and in my private own practice. But here, with all that time in my hands and without my network, and my friends and whatever. I mean, everything that was familiar to me. I felt like I was lost. And so I started a program in Newfield, and I think that helped me to kind of like understand where I was in my life and start rebuilding myself a little bit. But then when I finished that, I was like, okay, that was great. But then, if I want to make a bigger offer, or if I want to take these two organizations, or if I want to build a community, or if I want to build a team, how do I do it? And I searched a lot, and I didn't really find anything like the program in the Institute that would take all these distinctions and actually mix coaches and leaders in the same place, in the same learning platform. And so I was like, okay, I need more. I need something really concrete that will help me to take this to the world. And that's when I found the Institute. Just a little bit of a background. I had a similar story as Andrea. I have always been recognized for being a good performer. And also that came because I was very, very competitive, and I was doing it in the sports. I was a swimmer, a golfer, a tennis player, and most of my trainings were with the guys. I didn't have a lot of girls doing this competitively, so I felt like I always had to do an extra effort to be able to kind of like beat the guys. They're stronger, they're more agile, and so for me, it was always this need of, proof that I was on top and that was good enough. Also with a story of being a perfectionist. And so I remember, in Colombia, when I used to do assessment for people when they were going to go into an organization, and I was in the psychology department, when I asked them about, their strengths and weaknesses and things like that, they will come and say, well, I'm a perfectionist. And at that point, I was like, great, this is somebody that is going to get the job done. That's what I need. And actually, I used to take a lot of pride in that. And when I came upon the discourse, I realized with that story, a lot of suffering comes along, because that's a story that is unwinnable. We're never going to be perfect. And actually, the strategies that we use in our life, in our work, in our relationships with our significant others to be perfect, bring a lot of suffering. And so I realized that that source of suffering of not feeling good enough, because ultimately being or playing this game of a perfectionist, it's a story for I'm not good enough. And so I started recognizing not only that I had that story and that was a source of suffering for me, but also I recognized that in all the people that I was able to talk and interviewed and in my coaching sessions. And I'm like, wow, what if we're able to tap into this story in organizations and really create our own power and let go of that story. And what could be possible in organizations if all of us believe that we are good enough and that we are able to achieve the results that we want, and that we don't need to prove ourselves to anyone. We don't need to be perfect. We're allowed to make mistakes. We're in a learning journey. And so I was like, okay, this is what I want to do. I want to take this learning of and letting go the perfectionist. And so now I consider myself a perfectionist in recovery. And so I now, with the CEO at work and the network that I have created, I actually go into organizations, and I'm able to help people to find their power, because what really drains our power is the story that we have behind of not being good enough. And so I realized through the discourse that one of the things that I wanted to do in my care was really to help leaders and organizations to be more powerful, coming from a story that we need to play together, that we are good enough, and that also there is a path for learning, right? And so we're never going to be perfect, but we can be beginners. And as we declare that we're beginners, a lot of possibilities open up for us. People will help us. We will find what we need, the resources that we need. And so that's the work that I've been doing after joining CEO. It's helping organizations and leaders to tap into their power. And I think it has been very impactful because the work that I've done with the organizations that I've worked, they have always called me back, and I have been able to triple the offers that I've made in my company. I have also been able to duplicate my income, and I think that I'm a happier person, right? I understand and show up as a vulnerable person, and I understand that being vulnerable is not actually wrong, is the source of connection. And I have built now a network of friends of my own, a community of people that I work with. I have a better relationship with my husband, with my family. And I think what is the most, what's the nugget here, it's that I have been able to tap into my own power and sending it to the world.
Wow, that's beautiful. I love listening to all of you, and I'm sure I'll love listening to Koba here too. That's very, very well said. And some of the things, if I may share back, and I think it's akin to Andrea's share when in her experience, is that you're sharing some real tangible results. I mean, tripling the number of offers, you're doubling your income. Yeah, that's important, but you're also doing the good heartfelt work, like the work that has you alive and feeling on purpose and connected to your core and your care. And I love it. And finding power and the way in which you even speak power. Some people can have a story about power, and the way it lands in my listening is one of a possibility, one of like, okay, this is my potential, my ambition. This is what I can do with my power. Like there's positive, much like other stories people can hold about different things like money, for example. So yeah, very nice.
Definitely, because we think that, or we in our traditional discourse, we tend to think that results are produced outside of us, that there is something that we need to do outside to produce those results. And what's really unique about the Institute is that they do the opposite, is that the results come from the work that you need to do in your inside, right? And from that point on, then you can create bigger outcomes, achieve bigger results. It's not from what you do out there, it's what you do inside that's gonna create the real impact.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And it's when we look to you all and other examples of the world. It's, you know, particularly you all are stepping up as leaders, you know, in a way, and the people that can see themselves in possibility because of the stand that you take, and you did that internal work to start.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Yes.
beautiful. Yeah, and it was interesting too that you talked a little bit about, you know, the strategies, and you know that part of it's the story and the source of suffering, and you know this transition that can happen, and it sounded like it was happening for Andrea as well, which is the questions that show up, the what if, you know, what could be possible, and noticing the transition of mood with the story. So that was beautiful. What else would you add in terms of maybe um, things that, you know, let me just see here real quick. Oh, well, perfect. Hold on a second. I got Michael. I'll share it real quickly here, and then I'm going to ask the question here. But Michael, Sharon, Juliana, thank you for sharing. Being a liberator of power for leaders and their organizations by freeing them of their limitations, allowing them to release their brakes and go. Well said, Michael. I appreciate that. Okay, got it. Perfect. And then also, I love also hearing that you are a perfectionist in recovery. I as well will raise my hand to that. So yes, you know, for those listening, it's, you know, hearing these stories, you may resonate with some of this. You may find some of yourself in their story. And by that, we can say, you know what, I'm not alone. So let me, if I may, I'll return to the question. I'll open it up. You know, Michael, thank you for the shares. And if any of you have questions here, please do type that into the chat. I'm going to ask one question while I wait for your questions. And Andrea, Juliana, if there's anything else that shows up for you that changed from this work, and you can point in, you know, you've pointed in directions of your income and making bigger offers, and maybe it's, you know, for the organization or relationships or some other area of your life, both professionally and personally, that you see have changed.
Yes, Chris. Well, I think one of the areas that had the most impact was to be able to learn how to fly with others. You know, in school, you know, we learned like who has the best answer, me, who has a 10 in the test, me. And then, you know, we go to college and we also have individual tests, and we need to perform well and get the bigger or the greatest grade. And then all of a sudden you're like, okay, now you're ready to go into the world and play with others. And I'm like, that doesn't add up, because we never learned how to play with others. We learned how to be solo performers and indulge in our perfectionist and in our competitiveness. And it's hard going to the world and learn how to play with others. And definitely that has been one of the biggest impact in my life. It's being able to play with others, to create meaningful relationships with deep care. And definitely the relationship that changed the most was the relationship with myself, and bringing a lot of compassion and kindness and care. And so now I see things that I didn't see before, like how the heck I was you know, even able to play in an organization or to play with others if I never learned how to do that. And so this is a very interesting skill to learn, and it's not trivial.
Very true. Very true. Well, my assessment is that's true as well. So, yeah, no, thank you. Yeah, and I like the fact that you're talking about learning to play with others, and you know, particularly as we look at our life and, you know, the things that we want to create in our life, the results that we want to be able to produce. Sometimes those are bigger than what we can do on our own. So we have to play with others. We have to invite others to play. We have to accept the invitation to play with others. right?
Definitely. If you
Yeah.
want to play big, you have to play with others.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Well, maybe we can come back if I want to be, if it's okay with you. I want to be mindful of time and make sure I give some time also to Koba. We come back to you, and I'd like to hear a little bit more about, if we have some time here to come back and hear about, the results that you've been able to produce and being able to play with others. And you talk about doing it with your clients. So let's, put a bookmark on that if that's okay. You shared a lot, and thank you very much for everything you shared. This is a wonderful, wonderful story for me to hear. So I'm sure for others that are listening here too. So thank you. And take a deep breath, and let's transition over here to our third panelist here for the day. Also a year 3 CEO participant, and like as I mentioned, co-founder of Altus Growth Partners, and been running his own practice for quite some time. I don't even know how many years, Koba, you could speak to this, but Koba, why don't you share a little bit of your experience and where you were when you found the Institute and what you were hoping to achieve at the time you found us.
Yeah. So, well, I'm calling in from California, so I'm saying good morning. If somebody is watching this in the morning, this is the mood I'm in. It's starting of a new day, and always happy to share stories. So when I look at where I started, I came in the U.S. in '95 to do a graduate study with a guy called Igor Antsov, which in the field of strategic management is one of a big name. But the way I came to that is that when I was in Belgium, so I'm originally from Belgium, that's where the other exotic accent is from. So you have Colombia and Belgium on the panel. Is that when I was in Belgium, I wasn't a good student. I didn't like going to school. I think school was restricting me. I was a rebel. I got into a lot of trouble because I spoke up when I wasn't supposed to. And yet I had this curiosity for learning. And it's this curiosity for learning that brought me to the US to do the graduate program, because I read some things about Igor Antsov, and it really triggered my curiosity. And I went to the school because in my mind, that's the only way you could learn, right? If you had to learn, you have to go through the drama of what a school institute is. And so that's why I came to the US. My plan was to be here for 2 years. And then I was going to go back, take all my knowledge, and just go, whatever plan we should be going on after you graduate. As I was in the US, and I actually got the opportunity, the school system here in the US is very different than Europe. It's much more open and much more interactive. And as I got to work with Igor Antsov, I actually got engaged in the business community, and I really was able to let loose all my enthusiasm about trying out new things and being the rebel, and just going into organizations. And I worked with a lot of technology companies, and so that's what I was doing, and it really energized me as I started my career. And one of the things that I did promise myself when I graduated is that I would never go into consulting. So fast forward a few years, as I was, my last official paid position was for a VC-backed startup company where I was the vice president of finance, and one of the .com.bomb things, right? So we did really well, and then we didn't. And as that was coming to an end, I was talking to an organization in Germany who wanted to establish their operations here in the US. And I was thinking I was really going for my next, applying for my next position. I was trying to be the perfect candidate for what they needed. And so as I was in these conversations and flew to Germany, helping them figure out the business plan, they decided to have their operation set up in the Bay Area, which is Central California. I live in San Diego, which is Southern California, and I wasn't willing to move. So in essence, that whole engagement became my first consulting engagement. And I had so much fun doing this, and it was so energizing that I said, that's it. That's what I want to do. This was in 2001. I was 30 years old. I never worked for a big company. Well, my last company wasn't working for a big company. So they have a big company as my client. I never worked for a consulting company or a big consulting company. I had no idea what I was doing. Yet what happened and the experience that I went through was so energizing that I need to figure this out. The first 6 months, nothing happened. So it was a little bit knocking on my head, but I was committed in doing it, so I stuck with it, and eventually, I figured it out. And for the first 9 years, I had good times, had bad times, as consulting goes. And in that period, one of my partners that I'm still working with, that I started working with, so I started in 2001, we started working together in 2002, was a former CEO of a company that did several successful turnarounds, and he would attribute those turnarounds to the work that he had done with Newfield, which is the coaching organization, where he had adopted the ontological background, the ontological discourse. And so he introduced that ontological discourse to me, and it immediately resonated with me, except for one thing. It just sounded cuckoo. It's just like it resonated with me, and I said, but there is no way that you can talk about this in any particular way and walk into an organization. And he agreed. And so what we set out to do from 2002 was, let's find ways to how we can operationalize that, how we can make this language actionable in such a way that it resonates with people and meeting them where they are, right? And so that's what we started doing. And so for the first several years, he was definitely my mentor in this whole ontological discourse. It took me probably a year just to be able to pronounce ontological, right? And so so that's what it is now. But if I go to 2010, I still got to a point where I was actually, not feeling satisfied with what I was doing. I was kind of burned out, and I actually went through 3 or 4 months where I was really thinking about what should I be doing, and I actually gave myself permission to say, you know what, you've done this 9 years. It's a rich experience. I've learned a lot. I now know a lot about ontology and how it can help me. Let me go take this back into the workforce, because the work that I was doing and the way I was relating to my clients wasn't feeding me. As I made that decision after 4 months of should I really, because letting something go is hard, right? As I made the decision, I think 2 weeks after that, I got a call from a client who's still a client to this day. That said, the CEO that met a few years earlier says, we had this conversation then, it really resonated with me. I wasn't ready then, but I'm ready now. And I'm like, oh crap. I just decided that I wouldn't do this. I mean, I really liked who he was. We really had a good connection. And then for me, it was like, I'm not sure. So I was open with him. I said, here's where I am, here's what I'm doing, and here's what I'm looking for. And so he asked me, do you have something already? He said, no. So, well, why don't you start working with us? And if you find something, I'm sure we'll figure out how we can phase it out. But what we have, we have. I said, sure, fine. And basically structure the engagement based on the relationship. And as I started doing that work, I had so much fun doing that. And I got the same sense of that I had, 9 years before that, when I said I want to do the consulting. And in the year leading up to that, something came to light to me. I'm from Belgium. In Belgium, we build relationships. In the European cultures, that we build relationships, and then if something needs to happen, you fall back on your relationships, and and you spend a lot of time in connecting with each other. The standard I took, or what I understood when I came to the US and I started consulting, is that people said, I don't know you. Show me what you can do first. And then if I like what you do, then we'll think about building a relationship, because time is money. At least that was my understanding at the time, that's how people operated here. And so I would do a lot of little projects to get things going, to prove myself. I would end up being with clients that, yes, they were paying clients, but they weren't necessarily the clients you want to be with. And so, which created a lot of the churn. And so when I started the work in 2010, and I started doing the work being on my terms, I started to do the work being correlated or aligned with who I was, is when I started looking, okay, there has to be more learning. In that period, somebody that I already worked with that had been exposed to ontological discourse, he had been looking for learning more. He had found out about the Institute for General Leadership. His name is Mitch Simon, an amazing coach. And he's as he went through the first session of IGL, he called me and said, Koba, you got to look into this. And so as I learned about the program in IGL, and I'm part of the Coaching Excellence in Organization, I all of a sudden found an institute that was doing what I've been trying to do for the last 9 years, which was operationalizing these distinctions in a business context. And that's really what I was looking for, and that's really what brought me to the Institute, in a way as to, here's other people that have been thinking about it, they've been practicing this, that have been acting this out. I'm not alone. I'm not doing this by myself or with one or two other people. There's a whole community of people doing that. And so for me, I came in with already understanding a lot of the ontological distinctions in one particular way. And so by joining the Institute, I got exposed to understanding these distinctions in many different ways, and starting to play with it. And so, and I think what I didn't even appreciate when I joined, and I think was actually far more valuable for me as I was joining the CEO program, is I discovered a community of people that were exploring in the same fields and that had similar questions they were exploring, that I now could talk with. And I always get my best ideas in a conversation with somebody else. It's really hard to come up with the great ideas if I don't talk to anybody, right? And so now you had a whole community of people that were providing that were we challenging each other, were we learning together, were we exploring each other's edge, where you have somebody who's a perfectionist in recovery, or we have somebody who is overwhelmed in working, and you sort of going together and saying, we all have different facets of the same thing. How do we work with that, right? And so as I started the journey of working, of doing the work and the learning with IGL, a lot of new distinctions became visible to me. One of which is that this simple question: what do you care about? When I heard for the first time what you care about, it's like, why would I waste my time on that? What a question! I couldn't ask that question. It was the same reaction that I had when I started consulting. But I really started exploring it, because one of the great benefits of being in this program is you actually are working with a coach, like what Andrea is now doing with people that are participating in the program, to help you think through it, that give you the space to think about it, and they ask you the questions to sort of explore it. And as I was talking about what I care about, I really started also thinking together in this work in sort of what my 10x game would be. I had a successful practice. I was doing well, but it was small. It was me and some other people, and that's what we're doing. And how could we make this thing bigger? And one of the things that I talk about, and I'll hold your desk and hold your chair before you hear that, is that I believe that we can generate world illumination, right? And that's what I want to be doing. And so as I was in the Institute, and as I started working with other people, is when we came together as to how do we create this bigger game. And that's when we started. That's when we launched Altus. Altus Growth Partners is a generative consulting company that's affiliated with that works together with the IGL, and these are all people that have been going through the program. We share the similar ontological background, but we have many different interests, many different levels of experience, many different impacts in the world, where we're putting our heads together and really coming together and say, what does it take for us to build a commitment-based organization? And so we have distinctions around what that really means. We have the distinctions, the ontological distinctions that we work with in Agile, we apply, and then from there we're always learning. And our motto is always about making sure that people have the right conversations to get to the results they want to get to, right? And so and that's always making sure that when we do the work with the clients that we have, that's what we're doing. So we have been and are operationalizing these distinctions. We're bringing them into the world for the sake of creating world illumination. Now, let me say one more thing, because I think it's important, because that's where we speak from. I care about making an impact on other people in such a way that they can impact others at a deeper level of consciousness. That's what I care about. That care, being able to articulate the care and being able to stand in the care and be able to organize around that, allows us to really build a community where we can belong to, and we can act in, trust each other, and really act out on our values. Which, by the way, for us, our values is all about being abundant. There is more than enough for everybody. Being joyful. If something is draining us, then we should talk about it, because that's not the life we should be living. You only have one life. And legitimacy, because we all have valid perspectives. They might not be the same that I do, but the richness comes in listening to that. And so all of this wouldn't have been possible if I wasn't going on the journey with the IGL and through the CEO program. And that's really what it opened up for me.
That's beautiful. Thank you, Koba. And you can across all three of our panelists today, including Koba here, you can listen a deeper impact in their lives and in the work that they're doing with others. And the impact is, it sounds, I listen, much more profound than maybe others. I kind of equate it to the Jerry Maguire moment, if you've ever seen that movie, and towards the end where there's that real connection. There's some magic going on there. Koba, maybe we only have a few more minutes, but maybe just briefly, there's so much. One thing I will share. Michael's chiming in here too, and thank you, Michael. He's shared that operationalizing the ontological distinctions for organizations has been the roadblock for him too. So, if we have time, maybe we can come back to that. If Michael, you want to stay on, but maybe just real quick, if you could, maybe share some of the outcomes that you've been able to produce through your work, through this learning, maybe, or what's changed.
Well, so lots of change. I think the biggest thing. So when I referred to that, where I used to do always project based, and so you do something in 3 months and 6 months, and you're really excited when you have a 1 year engagement. Is that I would say, in the last 7-8 years, 75% of the engagements that I've offered, are 5-year engagements where we make commitments with our clients that we would be working together. I also have to say, in the last 2 years, some of these engagements have been much longer than that, where the client and I sit down and say, or the client and us sit down and say, what do you care about? What do you want to accomplish within that? And how do you want to travel this road? Understanding that there's never a quick fix, and it's always about, identifying what's the practices that we need to shift in order to get to the life that we want to get to, which organizations have a life too, because it's comprised of all the people's lives within that organization. And so being able to make those offers and being able to work with it really creates stability for us as to what we're doing. It also allows us to think and be partners with our clients and saying where they want to go, and allows us to really make bigger impacts and greater shifts with our clients. So I think that's probably one of the key things that has shifted through this work.
Oh, that's beautiful.
One of many, but I know we're out of time.
Yeah. Well, and I think what you share too, in being a true partner with our clients, I don't know that everyone always achieves that or is able to create that in a relationship with their clients. A true partnership. It's you're on the outside. You may be kind of forcing things in on me, but to stand side by side in a partnership and let's be in this exploration together is the way I'm listening to you right now.
Right.
Yeah, beautiful. Well, there is a couple questions if you all have time here, at least Koba here. One being, can you clarify what you mean by world illumination? And then I'll do a little bit of wrap up, and then we'll continue on with another couple questions that we have.
How much time do I have for world illumination?
A minute.
No. So the simple question is that we in the institute we talk about the we world, right? Which is we translate in people, conversation, results. The world where we always focused on in the world is like, what are the results? What are the numbers? Are we hitting our numbers? What are all these things that we need to do? And sometimes we get so focused on it, we lose the humanity of what it is we're really trying to accomplish. We lose about who the people are. And so as they're struggling with it, or as they're looking for a bigger impact, we're looking really as to who are we as a people? What are the conversations that we're having? How are we coming together as a team in order to produce the impact that you want? And it's like, you listen to Juliana and Andrea, the money that they talk about, that became an after effect, a side effect, that was no longer the goal. That's a part of the illumination. But then the key illumination is when Juliana spoke to this, is that in order for you to really impact the conversations to get to the results you want to get to, is you have to become self-aware and see where you are and what's the next step that you want to make, where you want to leap over that edge. And for us, world illumination is really making that visible, because if that's all visible to each of us individuals, we can do bigger and better things together. And as a result, we can impact more things positively within the world.
Very well said in a minute or minute and a half. I appreciate that.
That's right.
No, thank you. That's beautiful. It's beautiful, and thank you, Koba. I do want to be respectful of everyone's time, but we do have a few questions here too. And Michael, thank you for sharing there. Thank you, Goba. So I think that answered the question there. I want to thank, first off, I want to thank all three of our panelists today, Julio Nevada, Andrea Bordenka, and Colo Bogart. Thank you all for making the time to share your experiences, your voice with others out there that are considering this possibility or are already stepping into this, but want to get some grounding for the choice that they're making, because it's hearing about the results others are producing, not what we can say as an institute, that they could really be meaningful for people that can have them step into the possibility. So thank you, each of you, for joining us. And with that, we do have a couple other questions. So if you all need to excuse yourself, I know I want to be respectful of your time, please. Otherwise, maybe we have a few more questions, and we can have each of you address those questions if you're able to stay on. How does that sound?
Yes, I have 10 more minutes.
10 more minutes, awesome. Well, we'll give you the first question then, and Andrea and Juliana, do you have a little extra time?
Yeah, I can stay for 10 minutes.
Perfect. All right. So we have a few other questions, and I think for others that will be listening later. What was the shift from the question of care that became meaningful for you? What was the shift from the question of care that became meaningful for you? I don't know. I suspect, Natalie, that might be directed towards Koba, and that you decided to pay attention to this.
Yeah, so it's interesting, and it's interesting and funny, because I now have the same conversations or similar conversations with my clients, right? So what do you care about is on the surface is such a simple question, right? And as you start answering it, as I started going through it, it took me probably 9-10 months before I came to something that I really felt, this is me. And once I define it, and so it's just the clarity about really knowing what that is, which in the back of your mind, if you don't pay attention to it, you think you know, but as you start to articulate it, you realize you don't really know. And then starting to have the conversation about, how does this inform me, how I relate to my wife, to my kids, to my colleagues, to my friends, to my clients, and really having that sort of as the guiding, and what am I doing to take care of my care? It really informed what it go. And so for me in this process, it really made me more confident in that I was no longer willing to play the game of doing a show and tell. I was always going to be committed to building a relationship, and if I met somebody who wasn't ready for a relationship, that was fine too. And I did this because I did it from where I cared about, and then being able to do this was really freeing for me, and really allowed me to sort of expand the thinking around what was possible. And I think for Altus, for example, one of the key questions we ask before you even join Altus is that question, what do you care about? Because we want to make sure that we organize around a similar care, because people have different cares, and that's fine. And I think being organized around a similar care makes it easier for us to be committed around the things we want to accomplish, because we want to have a similar impact within the world. And so it's really being a guiding question, and now extremely meaningful and funny and fun to do with my clients, because they'll go through the same process I went through when I ask, what do you care about? It's like, I've had people get frustrated with me because I kept on asking the question.
Like, what else?
Yeah, no, it's like, this is it, and then they knew it wasn't. So okay, if you believe that, then that's it. So, but it isn't. Okay, then what could it be? Anyway,
Exactly.
so
Yeah, no,
it's revealing.
Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, and we had a couple other questions. And I think this one was also maybe directed for you, Koba. But I'm actually going to invite Andrea or Juliana, if you want to step into this question here, because I think the two of you have also had the experience, and we'll kind of rotate it back here. And the question is, can you tell me more about the community? And so maybe one of the two of you, Andrea or Juliana, can speak to community and your experience of it.
The community at IGL?
Yes.
Yeah, so Koba touched upon it. It's having other people who are aligned in this vision to create meaning in the world, and knowing that we all have our strengths and our stretches. So there are some things that, like Koba has this curiosity for learning. Maybe someone else gets contracted around learning. And so how can we build this community saying, I have certain competencies that I'm really good at, and you have some that you're really good at, and how can we leverage each other's strengths here to build something bigger? So I've gotten so much input and insight from all of the people that are in the program that I've gone through over the years, and I continue to go to the events and getting new insights, because wherever we are, when we listen to people in the program, in the learning, so even if it's someone who's a newer student, they have new eyes and a different lens than I have. So being able to be in these conversations in this community to help each other out has provided me so much more depth. And because I have this muscle now that I'm building, and I continue to build, of asking for help and asking for input, I'm much more open to listening in a different way, where I'm able to apply it to my life in a way that works for me and that helps other people too.
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah, I kind of listen to the depth of the community and what they're able to bring to this as building your own depth as well.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Juliana, what about your take on community, and then we'll wrap up here.
Well, like I said before, Chris, one of the biggest things that shifted for me was being able to have a community and not fly solo. That has been very important and meaningful, because through the community is actually how I have been able to make a bigger impact in the world and in the work that I do. Normally, if I feel stuck, or if I'm designing a loan for a client and I need more ideas, I know I can reach out to someone else. They are gonna share resources, ideas, co-design with me. And so now I know that I don't have to feel stuck, that I can always reach out to someone else, and that they have the same care as me, and it's producing or taking these distinctions to the world to really empower people. So yeah, that has been very important for me and meaningful.
Beautiful. Yeah. Well, I love hearing that. It's fantastic. I think we had a little comment, some thank yous, and thank you all for joining. We had Michael had to jump off there, but again, thank you, Juliana. Thank you, Andrea. And Koba, thank you as well for joining us on our first grad panel here today. And I hope that we can do more and share the experience, because you three have some wonderful experiences, stories that you're sharing, and the results that you're producing in the world, and the meaning and impact. And there's others. So hopefully we'll get to hear from some of the others here in the future as well. But thank you all for joining us today. And we might see your faces out there in the world a little bit more, because I think there's a lot of great things being said here, some experience wise, that others would like to hear as well. So thank you so much.
Thank you.